When people hear the name Jeffrey Epstein, they often think they already know the story. A wealthy financier, a private island, powerful connections, an arrest, and then a death in jail. Case closed. But the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that this story was never really about just one man. It was about how he operated in plain sight for decades and what happened when the public finally demanded to see the records behind him. When the Epstein files were announced, expectations were high. Millions of pages of documents were said to exist, covering years of investigations, interviews, travel logs, financial records, and internal communications. The promise was transparency. The idea that the full scope of Epstein's activities and the network around him would finally be understood. But when the files began to surface, something unsettling stood out almost immediately. The information wasn't explosive, it was incomplete, and the missing pieces felt intentional. To understand why the Epstein files matter, it's important to understand who Epstein was and how unusual his life actually was. On paper, Epstein claimed to be a financier, but his professional background was vague. He had no clearly documented investment firm managing billions of dollars. No well-known clients openly credited him for their wealth. And yet, he lived like someone with limitless resources. Private jets flew constantly. Mansions were maintained across major cities. A private island existed beyond the reach of ordinary scrutiny. For someone with such an unclear resume, his access was extraordinary. That access extended far beyond money. Epstein appeared in the orbit of politicians, academics, business leaders, and celebrities. He positioned himself as a connector, someone who could open doors, arrange introductions, and bring people together. In many circles, being invited by Epstein meant entry into exclusive spaces, and for years, very few people asked how or why he had that power. As survivors later came forward, a disturbing pattern emerged. The behavior described was not random or impulsive. It followed a structure. Recruitment happened in familiar ways. Silence was encouraged early. Boundaries were tested gradually. Control was established. This repetition matters, because repetition suggests planning, and planning suggests more than one person involved. Epstein did not function alone. People helped arrange meetings. People managed properties. People coordinated schedules. Yet accountability remained focused almost entirely on him. This is where the Epstein files become critical. These documents were expected to map out the full picture: who knew what, who interacted with whom, and who may have ignored warning signs. Instead, readers encountered heavy redactions, entire sections blacked out, names replaced with initials, dates removed, context stripped away. Events were mentioned without explanation, as if the most important details were deliberately kept just out of reach. Some individuals appeared repeatedly across different documents. Their names surfaced in flight records, contact lists, calendars, and emails, but these same individuals were rarely described as suspects, witnesses, or persons requiring further investigation. They simply existed in the background, present, but untouched. The files documented proximity without consequence. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Epstein files is the language used throughout. Instead of clear legal terminology, documents often rely on vague phrases such as individual of interest or person of significance. This kind of wording avoids assigning responsibility. It doesn't accuse, but it doesn't exclude either. It creates distance. And that distance matters when dealing with people who hold influences. Over the years, several investigations into Epstein slowed or quietly stopped. Complaints were filed and minimized. Warnings were raised and then dismissed. Deals were negotiated behind closed doors. When evidence pointed toward lower-level participants, action followed. When evidence pointed upward toward wealth, power, or reputation, momentum often faded. The files hint at decisions that were never debated publicly. Decisions about limits, decisions about risk, decisions about who could be pursued and who could not. When Epstein was finally arrested, many believed the truth would inevitably come out. Court proceedings would force disclosure. Testimony would clarify relationships. Documents would be entered into the public record. But Epstein's death in custody abruptly ended that possibility. Instead of answers, it created more uncertainty. Trust eroded. Speculation filled the gaps. And the files, rather than closing the story, made those gaps impossible to ignore. What makes the Epstein files so disturbing is not that they reveal shocking new crimes. It's that they reveal a system comfortable with partial truth, a system that documents just enough to appear transparent, while withholding enough to protect itself. The absence of names becomes as meaningful as their presence. The redactions speak louder than the words left behind. The most troubling possibility raised by the Epstein files is that they are not incomplete due to oversight or chaos, but because they reflect deliberate restraint, that Epstein was not an anomaly who slipped through the cracks, but someone who existed within a structure that quietly decides where accountability stops. In that context, the files are less about exposing a network and more about revealing how power manages risk. In the end, the Epstein files do not provide closure, they provide a mirror, a reflection of how institutions handle uncomfortable truths. They show how silence can be formalized, documented, and archived, and they remind us that in cases like this, what is missing from the record can be just as important as what remains. Because the Epstein story isn't only about crimes that were committed, it's about questions that were never fully pursued, and a silence that still hasn't been explained.